the table, and we saw that growth opportunity and a real big gap in the market, and really started it, two of us, and added kind of one person a year. And today, by no means are we big. We're 10 people, but we recruit for some pretty prominent companies, from an executive level to an individual contributor level. Companies like Shopify, Scotia's Digital Factory, Capital One's Innovation Lab, and we work with a whole host of other Series A, Series B backed companies, organizations like NIMI, which you may have heard of if you're into the wearable space, companies like Quandl, which is a big data marketplace, and I could list off about 20 more, but they're typically anywhere from 10 employees to a couple hundred. That's kind of our typical sweet spot.
So did you recruit for Derek?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'll leave you two to discuss that. Okay, great. I usually want to get the most difficult thing out of the way first. I always talk about money first. Let's talk about money.
You're paying me for coming.
That will be discussed. How did you get your startup capital, like in the early stage of the company? What's the capital structure right now? What's the revenue? What's the profit? What's your burn rate, etc.?
Yeah.
Anything that you can give.
Quite happy to. So we've got amazing investors. I mean, we've got investors that most startups would be.
Actually, I remember you mentioned, did you have a big name Chinese investor?
We have, does anyone know Li Ka-shing? Like Li Ka-shing owns like most of Hong Kong and half of Canada now. I think his personal wealth is.
I think he owns UK now too.
He owns the UK now as well. I think his wealth is about 30 billion. So he has an investment fund through his lifetime partner Celine, called Horizon Ventures, and they actually led our Series A round. So yeah, he's great. I mean, I haven't spoken to him personally, but I speak to Celine, and she's quite a fan of what we're doing here.
Celine Chow.
Celine Chow, yeah. Other ones we've got that are famous. We've got some stars. We've got Ashton Kutcher. Does everyone know Ashton Kutcher? No one knows Ashton Kutcher? Gosh. Ashton Kutcher's probably most famous for 2.5 Men, and he's like one of these guys I just hate because he's like tall and good looking, and everyone loves him.
Ever.
Right. He played Steve Jobs in the first Steve Jobs movie. Leonardo DiCaprio, does anyone know Leonardo DiCaprio? Right. So he's one of our investors as well through his family fund.
How did you guys get them to invest?
It's a lot of it's networking. A lot of it's like why a lot of people be along at an event like this tonight is you get to know people, and if you tell your story in a way that resonates, they're usually willing to introduce you to other people, and who will introduce you to other people. So I think a lot of that is the early investments were very down to Ariel. She's very charismatic. You should look Ariel Garten up on YouTube and look at some of the speeches she's given. They're very impactful, and I would watch some of the early ones and watch how she's matured to some of the later ones, and so definitely from her point of view, she's fearless. Right, just that day, she was a big reason I joined. She made me join. Right, she's not scared to knock on people's doors. I often go to networking events with her, and I kind of sit there. I'm quite introverted and shy, and she's not. Right? She will go and grab people and say hi and talk to them. So I would say the takeaway though there is just
come to events like this.
Come to events like this are very important. And the other thing is, quite often the analogy here is I've coached a lot of people in their life, and they ask me, how do you get on in life? And the big takeaway I try to give them is you get on in life if other people want you to get on in life. It's as simple as that. If people like you, they'll go out their way to help you get on. And I think that's the same for companies as well. I think if you conduct yourself with a good vision, and you've got a good story, and you're not going to embarrass them by doing stupid things, they'll introduce you to further networks, and you get to know people. So network and be respectful and be willing to do things for our people is another big thing. Don't always go to something and say, I got nothing, right? Actually go with the attitude, I'll try to do something. So when I approach investors, it's quite often, or recruiters, right? It's often, maybe I can introduce you to some people that could fit positions, or someone that's hiring. So I think a lot of it's just basic common sense of of conducting yourself in a way that people want to help you.
Means being a good person from the start. Good character pays off, right? So don't screw people over.
Yeah, good character.
Especially when you're early stage.
And one thing about investors is one skill. I mean, they've got lots of skills, but one thing I think investors learn very quickly is how to read people, right? So you want them to read you in a way that they want to engage.
Money. So how much money have you raised?
Money? No, that's
C
it.
round, ABC.
So some of the numbers we've raised about 17.8 in total, $17.8 million. The last round we closed there was with Omer's Ventures. Does everyone know Omer's? If you want money from, I mean, they're probably the second biggest fund within Canada. Great bunch of people. They're really nice to work with in the sense that they only have one LP, which is a big pension fund, so they'll actually work with you. We did a round with them last April for 10 million. We did a round before that with Li Kai-shing Horizon, where we raised 6. And then before that, it was a seed round with one of the top New York funds, an absolutely amazing group of people to work with, FFVC. They are probably FFVC, John Franco,
that's right.
right, and
Yeah.
Alex Katz and Dave Tetton, and
Dave Tatum, that's how I got to know Andy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
well,
just
yeah.
they are probably the highest performance investment fund I've come across in terms of just getting things done. They actually led our seed round, and the way it was actually started, the very first thing was actually an event for the Canadian government for the Olympic Games, and this is where Ariel became brilliant. A lot of the people she had working with that time were working on this project to actually control the lights on the CN Tower and Niagara Falls in the Canadian Parliament building using your mind. And you know, all these bunch of people got in and worked out how much it would cost and how much profit, and they came out with a number like $200,000. You know, Ariel just came in the room and said, this is going to cost $1 million, and they all nodded, right? And that's really where they get the money to, you know, start off, one, the credibility of doing a project of that magnitude, and secondly, they could actually go and hire people to actually do, you know, hire developers and marketers and everything they need to do.
But at that point, do you guys already have a prototype or a product?
They had a concept. They actually worked with other people's hardware way back at that time, and you know, they had a vision. And I think that's very important. Again, when you're speaking to investors or raising money, is really have a clear view of what you wanted. And Ariel had a very clear view, and it's actually frightening going back and looking at the business plan today to the one that was written by people essentially out of school, like, you know, 10 years ago, and it's almost identical. It's scary, right? So, you know, the very fact that they've managed to take this company from there to here at this point is just absolutely amazing.
So, okay, raised up much money. When did product launch?
Product launched, it's really one of the reasons why I joined the company is sometimes going from that idea and the complexities of bringing out a product can be difficult and challenging. So when I was brought in by the board, it was my remit was to really solve that problem. So we had a plan and we got in with about 5-6 months. We got the first 200 units out, and we made our first sale, which is always exciting. We sold 200 units to the Young Presidents Association. So thank you, Young Presidents Association. And then, you know, the first, and you know, these ones probably still don't work because we kind of, you know, wasn't. There was some issues when you make your first product. You know, you're still learning. But the first product were really sold by Indigo. Does anyone know Indigo, the chapters? So they were actually our first retail location, and our first revenue. We were speaking to the buyers, and buyers for these big companies, you know, they're very professional, but they usually have a remit of maximising the profit for the company they work for. So we're actually lucky enough that we actually got a meeting with Heather Reisman, the CEO of Indigo, and she fell in love with the product and actually invested in the company. And within a couple of weeks, we actually then got, through some contacts I had, into Best Buy Canada. And that was, I remember that, we launched in Best Buy Canada in November 2014, and we got summoned to their headquarters in BC, in Vancouver, And I was really very nervous because usually when you get some into these, you know, like Best Buy Corporation, it's going to be bad news, and it wasn't. It was actually, we were selling through much better than we expected, and they wanted us to expand within 6 weeks to every store within Canada. And we have a great relationship with Best Buy now, and if you actually go down to the flag, you'll actually see with us a lot of floor space now, but our first real revenue came from then, and then we did a partnership with a company called Gaiam down in the US. Gaiam is does anyone know Gaiam? No, it's, if you look at, everyone knows Lululemon. Right? I've even got Lululemon on, this is a Lululemon top. Great company, it's, the stuff's fairly expensive. Gaiam fits into that yoga, meditation world just a little bit, you know, lower down in terms of price. And, you know, you can buy their stuff through things like Target and Amazon. So we actually signed a deal with them, and they bought our product. So, you know, we've now gone to things like Best Buy US, and where you can get us in, I think Bell even has, who was from Bell, right? Even in 2 Bell stores right now as well, when we're in the Telus stores down in Brookstone in the States, and we're now working in distribution in Europe and even in Hong Kong. And we just sold our first fairly large order to Japan just last week, which was exciting as well. So revenues is, right now this year we'll do about 10 million. So
10 million sales?
10 million sales this year we should, and we're actually up.
This is only second year.
This is the second year of sales, so we're pretty pumped about it. And I'd like to talk about that later, that's not the end goal, but what we're doing is we offer a fairly good high margin product that the investors like, but it is a hardware product, and I want to talk about that, you know, later on. But you know, in that sales we probably do about a fifth of it through online sales. But what we noticed fairly earlier on, that our product was being bought by psychologists and other clinicians and professionals, and we actually went and talked to them to understand how we could actually, you know, service that market better. In terms of, you know, you asked me about money we raised, or cash burn. You know, cash burn's a hard one in a company. We actually have a company now that can be quite profitable. So if we decided we just wanted to be a small company, servicing what we're doing what we're doing, we could probably just be a nice profitable company, and you know, we could all go and buy our BMW 3 Series and just really, you know, have a nice life. But it's really not what we want to do. So our intention is not to make a profit in the short term. We are investing what capital we've got in terms of growth, and we just launched our first SaaS-based product to 17 clinicians, clinics that we're figuring out how we now put money there, and we're also now talking about, I can't say who the company is, but we're in the process of negotiating our first big licensing deal in terms of licensing our technology. So our whole vision in terms of driving revenue for the company is to move away from that hardware side to a SaaS-based company, to licensing, and we've got good examples of both now. And then really what we're doing is we now have the largest data set of brain data in the world, right? And we're seeing a lot of really cool things coming out in terms of what you can do with brain data. So really what we want to do is really go along that momentum, and just like Google vision is to own everyone's data for, you know, what you browse on the internet, where you are and what you eat and what you fly, we can actually own that data for above the head and look at how we can maybe monetize that in the future.
Is it mirrored, or does everybody feel a little bit scared by that? I'm like, chills on my back.
You know, and I should comment that, and I think you should be scared about it, right? Because, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of, about a year and a half ago where we were as a company, we had to really defend the efficacy of our science, right? It's weird, it's not good, you know, it's a placebo, it's you know, it was bad. But where we are now, we're seeing a lot of independent research and papers coming out where we no longer need to do that. The ones I can point to, there was a great research paper come out recently from the University of Memphis and IBM, and they actually used our technology. And what we're in the business of is building what's known as brain classifiers, things that can look at your brain and infer some state from it. And one in our product, what we do is we infer a state of meditation. That's the one that you can buy in Best Buy, is whether you're meditating well or or if you need a bit more practice at meditating. The one that IBM in Memphis did, they actually, and this has got a lot of potential in things like VR, is they went in and showed the difference of logical states. So they basically had a bunch of people watching cat videos, right? All these little cute cat videos. They had a bunch of people watch them, and then they had a lot of people watch instructional videos, like how you do things. And they could actually using our technology, build a classifier that could tell the difference between a logical state and an emotional state. And that type of thing becomes quite interesting in terms of VR and what you can do. The other one that was brought out recently was MIT. MIT used our technology to look at pain. Normally when you go to a clinician for pain, they basically diagnose you by asking, are you in pain? Right? Tell me between 1 and 10, right? Are you in pain? And the problem with that, as I understand it, is I try to look at myself. So say I've just had my wisdom teeth out and I'm in pain, and someone comes along and says you're in pain, I want as much drugs as I can get. I'm just going to say 10, so the doctor gives me all the morphine, so I'm happy. So I think what happens in that, the way it's been explained to me, you can get a lot of overprescribed prescription of pain medication. So what they've actually built is a classifier that can actually quantify how much pain you're in, and if you look at the paper, it's a beautiful response, right? It's not grey in any way. You can actually see pain and not pain quite clearly. The way they did it is they got people to basically put their hand in ice cold water. I don't know if any of you have done it. I'm not sure why any of you would do it, but if you actually do it and hold it as long as you can, it does become very painful. And they use that to actually study the brain classifiers. And the other one that was quite exciting, we worked with McMaster, and they looked at they were one of the first people to look at our whole database. And what they've actually found is we've got biomarkers there for telling people's age, right? So we can actually see biomarkers and basically assign people a brain age. And you can actually see how people's brains change through their age, and then at a certain age how it changes. So we've now discovered a biomarker there that was widely speculated and documented, but no one had ever had that rich database to go in and show it. We can actually differentiate gender by the brain signals as well. And that could have some interesting applications in things like VR as well. And they also in that paper actually found some things that what was known as affect in terms of people's mood. So inferring if people are happy or unhappy, and again we could show. It was quite controversial when we first looked at this, because basically it showed the males and females, this measure of alpha asymmetry, which is associated with happiness, changes as people grow older. And it turns out that men kind of start sort of happy and remain the same, but females get happier as they go through life, which was a nice result.
Are we lucky?
Right? So again, these papers are there for people to see. And then the recent one, we worked with University of Toronto, which looked at reaction time. And it showed by using our meditation product that there's something called the Stroop test. Stroop test, as you've probably all done it, is where you've asked to look at a word, and the word physically says red, but the colour of it's blue, and you've been told to say, what's the colour, right? What's the letters say? And it throws you off, and you have to think. Well, by using news, we've shown that we can increase that response time by about 60 milliseconds. And that's got a lot of interest from like the sports markets. Right, so 60 milliseconds for me is not a big deal. Right? I usually take 10 minutes to think anything. But say if you're a professional baseball player, then practicing to have a 60 millisecond advantage could mean the difference between a home run and not a home run. So this whole idea of scientific validation is really helping us to understand, how we can really commercialize our technology. So we really have got a true platform it interacts on. So we are crossing this consumer using a meditation product, but really what we can do is way, way more widespread and can really do things a lot in mental health and, VR environments and, some other cool environments as well.
So let me recap. You guys started by having a fearless leader who just take people in, take different investors in, build a prototype, get a more mature team in, and start making profit and partnership with big retail.
big retail.
And transitioning into big data, SaaS, licensing. That's going to do a lot to your evaluation.
Yeah, I guess the one bit I did miss out there, we also seeded a lot of research establishments. So we do work with like Mayo Clinic and Harvard and UCLA and lots of other people.
Can you talk about her background, just so people understand?
Ariel?
Yeah.
Ariel's amazing. I mean, Ariel is, for instance, I think she must be about this height. Like, I'm exaggerating, she's a bit taller, right? Right, and she's also this wide right now since she's like 9 months pregnant, about to give birth. But Ariel is got a great background in a very unique skill set. She was basically taught business from her father. Her father was, a successful realtor within Toronto and got Ariel involved in, selling and renting and buying. So she's got a strong business acumen. The other thing is she's lucky that her mother is a top artist. Right, her mother is a very accomplished painter. And her brother is one of the top pianists in the country. So she's also got this huge influence in terms of art and style. And she actually set up her own, fashion business. I love this story. And, basically if you go to Japan, one of the cultural norms in Japan is people don't like confrontation, right? So what she did is when she was in Japan there with her parents, she set up her own fashion line. She turned up to the biggest department stores to sell her fashion, insisted in seeing the buyer, and then the buyers didn't want to say no, so she actually got her fashions in some of the biggest stores within Japan. So, and mixing all that up with Ariel, where she then also went to university and she did her undergraduate in neuroscience. And, she surrounded herself with some really cool people with similar vision. She's just this really determined person that has a vision, and she's very much driven by wanting to change the world. What's important to Ariel is, she wants to make money and she wants to have a successful business, but she really, really, really just wants to make people's lives better. And that's her driving ambition in terms of pulling all this stuff together. So I don't know if I answer your question, but a very eclectic background that brings a lot of skill sets that I haven't seen in many people, to be honest. It's fairly unique.
Cool. Awesome. You can take a break.
Thank you.
Bruce turn. How to get started, money situation, burn rate, profitability, revenue.
Yeah, a lot of these details I won't share, unfortunately, so I guess the question won't be that hard. But I'll give you, we're a service business, so we don't have a product to sell. The reason why we got into the business is quite honestly the business model. And, not the reason why, but one of the reasons that contributed us deciding to get into recruiting was the business model. And just so maybe you understand how recruiting works, because a lot of people have no idea what a recruiter even does, is, we have three different business lines really. One is executive recruiting. So with an executive recruiting search where a company hires us and ultimately retains us to do the service, we get paid about 25% of that person's salary. Okay, so that's kind of the basics behind that. With what I call an individual contributor level search, so that could be a software developer, a designer, a DevOps person, we're in and around 20% for that type of position. And then we have another big business line as well, which is what some call IT staffing, where we provide contractors to large enterprise and smaller as well. A big example would be Cisco, where we've had up to 50 people on their teams within their professional services group. And what we do there is we're kind of a middleman from a financial standpoint, where we pay the contractor, so the developer, for example, and then we invoice the client, which would be Cisco, and then we make margin in the middle. So pretty straightforward business model. The great thing about starting the company was we had completed 2 placements before I even quit my job. So we were in cash flow positive, profitable situation before we even really got started, and that's been consistent. So it's more of a traditional how you start a business story with us and how do you grow it, as opposed to We didn't even do loans or anything. The other thing about recruiting is a very low overhead because there's no product. So, really what you need is you need a phone, you need a laptop, you need a place to buy coffee, and you need to, in my mind, similar to what Derek was saying, like, money is an outcome of what you do. You can't do things to make money. If you go at it with that angle, my belief is people aren't going to want to help you, and you're likely not going to be successful. It's important to pick a business where there's a business model and you're solving a real problem. Don't just do it for the money. Otherwise, again, it's likely not going to happen.
And there's a good indication there, because before you even quit your job, you already have cash flow come in, which I highly advise anybody who's wanting to try a new venture. Test it at least for 6 months. If you actually didn't get a cent in that 6 months, you gotta change. You really gotta change your model. But if you're in the right market, you should know pretty soon, right?
Yeah, and it's so easy, especially if you're looking at technology, to come up with a proof of concept using just the tooling that's out there and the frameworks that are out there. You shouldn't be building things from scratch anymore in order to get it in front of people to see if you are solving a problem. Because, everyone in this audience, I'm sure, thinks of ideas that they think are going to change the world, and you've really got to validate that that's the case in most situations. I understand that there's lots of entrepreneurs who are told no time and time and time again, and they've turned it into billion-dollar companies, so don't necessarily take my advice at its word, but unless you're solving a real problem, you've got to question whether it's the right business.
Great. So, the margin. I got to try it one more time. What's the revenue like?
No, sorry. Can't help you there.
All right. You're not the most difficult. I once had a very, very challenging case.
Really? Yeah, no.
Half an hour
I'm ultimately, I'm a 10-person business.
Right.
Right? So even what I told you wouldn't be that exciting, I'm sure. But, I think the thing I'd say is that you manage it for the long term as well. And it's important as a small business owner to figure out how do you accumulate retained earnings so that you can invest in the business, and picking the right time to invest and making calculated decisions around that. You can't, in the service business like ours, it's very much up and down too. Like we went through downturns in the tech crunch in 2008 where people stopped hiring, and you got to prepare for that. So
speaking of up and downs, somebody in the audience mentioned that they're managing, I guess, their up and downs in the early stage. What's your typical day like? Like, what's the, oh my god, like, this is shit again? Like, what is a typical day like? What's the good and bad, and particularly what's the ugly for both of you guys?
Sure. So, the challenge, I guess, is that, we operate in a hyper-competitive market. And we went from the days of being able to present 3 candidates for a job and knowing that one of them will get it and they're going to accept, right? These days, our candidates, they're on average getting 4 to 5 offers at once. So a bad day for us as an organization is certainly a rejected offer. That's the simple way. Because we really, except for the exec search, only get paid if someone accepts the offer. So that's a challenging day for sure. For us, our bigger goal, though, is really to help the tech community in Toronto flourish. So while people look at our website and we appear a recruiter, if you talk to us and at a deeper level and learn why we do things, we want to be a contributor to helping the community grow and the ecosystem grow. And that's always been number one for us. So a bad day for me is when we disappoint someone. So if and all of our business comes in through relationships. So we actually don't do any business development. We don't do any outreach. Like I've never picked up the phone and called Derek. Derek and I talked once through an introduction, but so when we aren't successful, and there's certainly going to be times when you're not, and we disappoint a client, in my heart that makes me sad in some ways, believe it or not. So that's it becomes very personal when it's a small business, and when it's all about, in our business, about how people perceive you and the value you bring to the community. when that isn't going your way, you know, that's the tough part.
It has to be personal at some degree because it's your own baby.
It has to, that you know, that fire in your belly and that
The intrinsic value that you want to help, you want to grow the community that you care about. I guess that's what.
It can't be about you. It has to, at some level, be about the people you're trying to help, right?
That's the first time I've heard that from a recruiter.
Yeah, I think if you talk to anyone that works with us, we have a very different approach.
Interesting, very interesting.
So
your bad days isn't that bad actually, because you still have that passion going on. And that's
well, financially, when you lose a deal, it's not a good thing. I can assure you that. But you know, as long as you do the right things, and we've always said as an organization that, you know, one deal is never worth sacrificing the brand that we're trying to build. So it's very easy as a recruiter to do something to convince someone to take a job by essentially lying to them, and they accept the job, you get paid for it, and you move on. Ultimately, that comes back to bite you at some point, and we've always said you can't ever damage your reputation. You have to maintain consistency.
That's a long-term play.
Yeah, it's the only way. And that applies, I think, across any business.
Right. Good, bad, and ugly.
Well, the first thing I've got to acknowledge, I think recruitment is one of the hardest industries to be in. I mean, it is very competitive, and it is all reputational based. I mean, if you get a bad reputation, it's not great. So, you know, my heart goes out to you in that one. It's a tough industry and very competitive. You know, I mean, my day starts with having a Starbucks. I mean, every morning I'll go and have a decaf Starbucks.
The $1 million question is when?
When? You know, it's not too bad. Hopefully we'll talk about culture at some point, but when you look at, and someone mentioned about attracting people to startups, and the type of skills that we need are like neuroscientists. Luckily, neuroscientists aren't paid a lot right now. There's lots of neuroscientists and not a lot of neuroscientist jobs. So we can usually get some really good neuroscientists. Software developers are like gold right now. A software developer particularly can leave Canada and go down in the valley, and you know, some people are leaving and getting salaries 200,000-300,000 straight from having a master's degree and you know, go down to the valley. We can't compete with that. And the other thing,
are you complaining you're a poorly paid CEO?
I'm a poorly paid CEO, very much so. Right, and the other one is something called deep machine learning. And again, these people again can go into the valley and get really, really good salaries. So one thing that's really important for us is the whole culture, because you know, what we've now, if people want to go and earn that money and they want to go to the States, we're not in that game. So typically people join us for a cultural thing, and a lot of them are millennials, and you know, they have a certain expectation from an employer what they have. And one of them is not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? They really don't want to get up at 6 o'clock. So we actually have core hours in our work where people, they have to work 8 hours, and most people work more than 8 hours, but they have to be in the building between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock. So they can come earlier or they can go later. So I typically go in about 9 o'clock, right? So it's a nice time to start. I usually get up, I cycle to work usually, and then the first thing I do is I park my bike, I carry it up my 3 flights of stairs, and I go down and get a Starbucks. And sometimes I'll take some phone calls from there, but I'll go up into my office. It's usually quite quiet at that time because typically the developers will come in. And it's quite interesting, the operational people are all in at like 6 o'clock and all really keen to do stuff and answer phones. And the salespeople are usually in early, but the Android developers and the scientists, it's like, you know, if they're in by 10 o'clock, it's cool, right? They're usually in 10:15 or so. But they typically work till midnight, right? They typically work in the other end and do their most productive work very late at night. So typical day is going into a fairly quiet office. It's like, where is everyone, right? But they all come in. We put a lot of emphasis on teamwork. We deliberately have everyone working together. We have no hierarchy. Everyone gets a desk, and you know, if they're lucky, they might get a chair as well, right? I mean, it's a very basic environment, but the building's beautiful. It's a lot of natural light, and there's a lot of socialization in the morning with people just saying hi. There's usually music on in the morning. The people that go in first get the choice of the music for the day in the building. And then really it starts to pick up pace around about 11 o'clock. And right through where the building will wind down around about 7 o'clock. Not really any good or bad days. The
You're
environment.
not stressed out at any point?
You know, we're a mindfulness company. We have a meditation aid.
Oh, yeah.
And right,
Your core competency is not doing that.
so we do have a unique culture. It is very different, and I'll try to explain it. We have our own yoga studio next door, so we actually use some of our money and build a yoga studio. Now it has business sense, but people can go there and meditate. And every time we start a meeting, that's a group meeting, we'll typically have something called a drop-in. And a drop-in is a very simple thing. You usually just stand up or sit down, and you just close your eyes and you just meditate for 5 minutes and just let the world go past. So we are quite a zened out office.
I want to join you guys.
Come
Sounds
to-
too good.
We are great. We don't have a lot of rules, and the one rule that we kind of have, and forgive for swearing, but we have the sort of no arsehole rule, right? We don't want anyone really disturbing the zen and how we work together. These people don't, and lucky enough we don't have anyone like that, but typically we don't have a lot of rules, right? I mean, people come up, they work hard, they get on with the people, they respect people, we all solve problems together. If there's problems, or even, the other thing I could comment is a lot of them have become personal friends. So what I've noticed within our culture, that people's social lives are very much based around the people they work with now. So we encourage things, and we give our office space. People have board game nights. We have alcohol in the office, so if people want to take drinks. Don't start drinking at 6 in the morning, please. But if it's at least after 4 o'clock and you want a beer, there's some in the fridge, and use what facilities we have for. We've had poker nights, we've had gaming nights, we've had music nights, we've had exotic animal nights, right? It's
What did you guys have in exotic animal nights?
We had a kangaroo, and kangaroos aren't toilet trained, I'll tell you that right now, so there's a bit of clean up from kangaroos, but snakes and scorpions and lizards and little, I can't remember the ones with the little things, lemurs, is it lemurs that jump about and big tails, but it's kind of cool. And we do some stuff that's about out there. We had a crystal healer that came in and played crystal bowls, which was kind of cool. People liked him, and so we try get that balance between, and it's not like we're in a typical day the culture's set by the people there, and if we are not paying $300,000 a year for people that could get it, then they have to have something from the job. So you have to create an environment where they're doing things that matter to them personally, and they also do things, they have to enjoy their day as well. It doesn't mean they don't enjoy every day, but they turn up, and generally speaking, I think the day is an enjoyable day for most people, including myself. I enjoy the people I work with. I know everyone, we're not a big company, but I do have a personal relationship with every single person in the company.
From what I heard, at least broke at least 3 rules that I was told never do in your company, but I guess I'm behind the times.
So what's the 3 rules?
Do not mix your personal life with your work life. Right?
Okay.
Really squeeze your people, because 10 to 4 is not going to cut it. The other thing is, don't have too much fun. Like, certainly no drinking in the office.
No drinking in the office.
Certainly no drinking in the office.
I mean, if I deal with them, I mean, you can't really stop people enjoying each other's company.
True.
So they do it. The second one there, in terms of squeezing people, I've always found squeezing people counterproductive, right? If you can make someone work 8 hours, but you have to motivate someone to make them work 12, right? They have to want it and believe it. And the other thing is, because there's so many demands on a person in a startup, there's more work than anyone can do. If you end up squeezing people, they'll just turn around and tell me what to work on. Where really you want them designing and figuring out what the priorities are themselves and being self-motivated. So I would actually say that rule should be thrown out. And the other one is, in terms of, we tried in the drinking, we tried to create a very non-judgmental environment. So we also supply unlimited fruit and unlimited healthy snacks. And just like we actually bring in people to teach yoga and do health classes. We try to accommodate everyone, and some people are quite happy doing a bit of drinking and some yoga. Some people will do what they want to do, and provided it's not done in excess and people tidy up, be respectful. We personally don't have a problem with it. I think when I socialise with people, I'll have a glass of wine with them, so it doesn't seem that odd to have a glass of wine with people I work with after a hard day's work. In fact, last Friday we did some kind of special work. We brought in champagne and cake for everyone. We all had champagne and cake at 4 o'clock. It was cool.
No wonder whenever I see you, you're always walking on clouds and feel very happy.
And staggering.
Right? A little bit of that too.
No.
Bruce, do you have anything added to the culture piece? Or have you nailed it with the intrinsic?
Yeah, no, I think that, culture is certainly at the core of everything that we've done, because we've, I guess for me, it's all about working with people that I enjoy being with. Like, that's actually number one. So, kind of contrary to all the rules. So, do we sit there and have fun all day long? No, I wouldn't say that it's fun. It's hard work, right? But at the end of the day, that's the most important thing for us building our company, was to hire people that, when you have to sit there with them for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, you're going to enjoy their company. And we go as far as on an annual basis, we go to our cottage, and our employees like each other so much, they like share bedrooms and like whatever. Like, it's, we're water skiing, we're playing frisbee, like we shut down for 2 days and we tell our clients, and it's, we're offline. It actually originally started as like company retreat strategy session, and then it became, let's just do the strategy when we're in the office, and it's really about, getting to know each other and enjoying each other. And that goes back to, my days in startups in the early 2000s. Like, I'm great friends with the people that I worked with, coming out of failed startups. I met my wife at a startup that failed. Like, so I'm the complete contrary. Like, you spend so much time at work either building a business or being an employee, you really better enjoy the people that you're working with. And the culture, it does build itself based on who you bring to the team.
So people who here, for those of you who have a partner in business or in life, whatever, who doesn't enjoy their company? Anybody? Great! That probably means the success rate for your first venture is a lot higher if you put your hands up. If you're too shy, go back, think about it. Never too late. Last question before I open up the floor for Q&A. I want to talk about evaluation. I don't know if this applies to your company that much.
No, valuation services industry is just 2 times revenue. That's all it is. It's not very good.
Okay.
His valuations can be much more interesting.
So, your evaluation. I was very intrigued by the comments. Remember once we were talking and you said profitability isn't revenue and profitability isn't equal to evaluation. You actually purposely increase your burn rate in order to achieve a much higher evaluation. Can you just elaborate on that for the audience?
Yeah, I mean,
because some of them actually have companies that might go public in the future.
Yeah, I mean, setting valuation is very difficult, and we're actually looking at raising our next Series C round. And
for how much?
So see, that's the bit where I think some maturity comes in, where you really don't want to set the valuation, right? You really need to find the proper lead investor to help you with that process.
But what's the motor in that?
So I think for those that are, I think capital markets have changed recently. I think most people know capital markets have changed over the last year, and a lot of valuations of company were driven really, really high, with a lot of money coming in to the market. Now that doesn't intimidate me. I still think there's a lot of money in the market at more realistic valuations, but I think if you look at say valuations of a purely hardware company right now, if you look at companies that are doing very well hardware like Fitbit and GoPro, because of high channel inventory levels and their valuations have gone down a lot. So if you present yourself as a hardware company, valuations might have gone from maybe 5x down to even as low as 2x right now. So, you know, being a hardware company is a hard thing. Where you get the crazy valuations, if you look at the companies that don't actually employ anyone or own anything, this is people like, you know, Uber, right? I mean, their valuation, I haven't looked at it recently, was 100x what their revenue was. It's just ridiculous, right? But, so our strategy is, for valuation, is to create where the value is. And where the value in our company is that transition that we're going through away from a hardware company to a SaaS-based company where we're actually, you know, generating recurring revenues, where we're actually licensing our technology to multinationals, where we don't actually have to do anything. In fact, we're actually charging the multinationals non-recurring engineering charges to get us to give them the technology to incorporate into their products. So, and then the other one that drives valuation is where people, I think, see that you've got useful data. So if we've got a big data play, we can look in our database and infer, you know, health data or marketing data. There's value associated by the investment community in that side. So I think you really, the way you decide the valuation is it's a bit of a negotiation. And really what you have to do is one, have very realistic expectations, right? You know, you can't just go and I think my company's worth $1 billion because, you know, investors not interested in that. I think what you have to do is really understand your financial growth plan. Be very honest about the financial growth plan that you've got and be willing to answer detailed questions on it. And the other thing is look at comparables. So at least when you're having the, you know, that negotiation or discussion, that you at least know what's going on in the market, so you can make references to, you know, drive that, you know, discussion the way that you want to go it. But my one view on valuation is to really focus on growth rather than valuation. So I'm not sitting out going, I'm going to make my company really, really valuable. I sit down thinking, how can I grow value within the company? Right? How can I grow revenues? How can I make these revenues, you know, more recurring revenues with licensing rather than hardware revenues? So valuation is very difficult, and you know the market's continually changing. So you know, do your homework. You know, speak to lots of people, and create a lot of buzz about your technology. Don't just go and speak to one investor. Make sure that you've got multiple investors excited about what you're offering, and then try to create that interest from multiple parties to come in and, you know, fund your venture.
So based on all the strategy, like the SaaS licensing and everything, what's the multiple that you're hoping for?
You know, it's really hard, and if I knew the answer for that, I mean, what I hope for is 1,000 times, right? Right, and somehow I think that won't happen.
That might work.
Right, so I would say what's important to me right now is to pull the money into the company that I need in order to grow the company to the next stage.
What will, say you raise your C round, what will be the money used for?
So yeah, so one thing we love being in Canada, and all our employees are in Canada, but you do hit some walls in Canada. So we would like to set up an office down in probably California, and also one in the US, in Europe. And we're looking at various places in Europe that make sense, so we can actually take our success story we've had in Canada. We're starting to see it in the US, but how do we go a bit more global there?
China, maybe?
China's a difficult one. We will go into China when it's the right time. We're seeing a lot of interest coming from China now, particularly in there's a lot of money going into VR in China, particularly in education, and people are interested in engaging with that. But you know, as a company, we're getting pulled in so many directions. There's so many things that people are using our technology for. We really want to be very focused and find the right partners. And I think that comes to valuation is, as well as chasing, you really don't want to pick the person that will give you the most money or the biggest valuation. I think you want to pick the people that can strategically help you grow. So when we're looking at our next round, we're looking at people from healthcare, right? So who can actually partner with us and understand, you know, the healthcare world and is invested in healthcare companies. We're looking at people that have invested in VR companies. We're looking at people, we've got great representation in terms of Li Ka-shing in terms of Hong Kong, but that might not necessarily be the same type of money from mainland China. So, an investor from mainland China that understood our business and shared our vision would be an interesting proposition as well. But right now we've got enough interest in our technology, and we've articulated the vision successfully to VCs. What we really want is the partners that can really, help us grow in the areas we want. And really what we want right now is to pull the money that we need to do the next step. So, we don't necessarily need $100 million to put in the bank and feel good about. All we do is need enough money to go to the next stage of our growth, so we can then go through that process again.
Which is entering new markets.
Which is essentially all about entering new markets and new verticals. So for us, right now we're in meditation, but we have markets and things like PTSD and ADHD and tinnitus. There's a beautiful video I can share with people where a developer is using our technology for taking disabled people sailing. They can actually put on a headband and they can actually steer the boat and raise the sail by just, using the headband, and that's really cool to see that. So, it's an emotional video. It's really, really cool to see it. So really, and the other thing about investors, they have to share our beliefs. We've been approached by investors that have been big and could make the company, but they haven't aligned with our values. They wanted to use our technology for things they wouldn't tell us about. And that just creeps us out a bit. It's just like, if you're not going to tell us what you're using the technology for, we just don't want to work with you. Right, so when you do the valuation and pick the value, you have to find the right investor, alignment of values, look at what experience they can bring to the table strategically, and I'd say the last thing you get hung up is on valuation. It's the least important thing. It's an outcome. It's not a goal.
That's interesting. So nobody else has that technology in the world? You guys are the only company that does it?
So there's some other people that do it. There's one company called Emotive, right? They actually very solid scientists and do a lot of cool things. The device looks very medical. It's like this thing that clamps. It just looks weird. And they've to date really gone for trying to use brainwaves to control things, right? And
Wow.
And you can't even use voice to control things well, so never mind brainwaves. It's a very difficult task to do, but they service some of the universities very well, and they've brought out some products that are good products. But we focus very much on user experience, so last thing we are is a brainwave company, right? We're a user experience. We're about meditation, or we're about helping you with PTSD, or we're helping about making a VR experience really cool. We've just developed technology we're commercializing for driver vigilance. So we can actually tell when people are looking at mobile phones and not looking at mobile phones. And this is getting a lot of interest from, people that maybe own large fleets of trucks, or, large amount of mining equipment, or have people in mission critical. So, I think having that broad appeal is always something that will push up the valuation as well.
So before I open up the question from the floor, imagine if the audience is your kids. I don't know if you guys have kids. Imagine if the audience, well, you do. Imagine that the audience is your kids. What's the top 1 or 2 things that you want at least they can go home and take away with them? Say that's worth their time.
You're worth it. I've got 4 children, three children, 1 foster son, and they're all very, very different. The first advice I could do is, do what you enjoy in life, right? And I know it sounds silly, but my kids have taught me a lot of lessons in life. It's not just me as a parent that teaches them, but a good one is my son. Love my son to bits. He did environmental engineering at University of Toronto, got a good degree, and the first job he did was delivering kegs of beer to parties for Steam Whistle, and he got encouraged to stay at the parties, and he loved it. And I said, look, I'll help you get a job. I know a lot of people, and we arranged them to get a really kind of introduction to a really cool job. And he turned around to me and says, Dad, I want to do it. I says, I'm going to tour Europe for the next 4 months, right? I want a job, but you don't get it, right? And so he's about to leave and tour Europe for, 4 months. And I actually kind of admire that, because what he's doing is pursuing what he wants to do in life. And his values is not driven by money. He doesn't care about money at all. He cares about hanging out with his friends, traveling to different places, and he just cares about having enough money. And I actually think he'll be, of my kids, he'll probably be the most content of them through life, because he can always do what he wants to do. Some other kids are a bit different. They actually want to, get on and make money and do it. So, coaching people and coaching everyone is, you have to figure out what you want to do. And once you figure out what you want to do, then I don't think there's a magic formula to it. I think it's just being very honest what you want. If you want to be a top lawyer, then I'd encourage you not to be at events like this, but probably study every night and get good grades, because that's the way you get into the top universities for, in law schools, right? So figure out what you want to do, and then really figure out how you get to the path of what you want to do.
Yeah, listen, I very much agree with Derek, and I have 3 young kids. My oldest is 12 now. I guess I would say, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to be aware. You have to be aware of what's happening in your circle of friends, in the communities you're part of, in the the areas that you work and where you're interested, because you need to be constantly thinking about what problems. I know I keep going back to this, but what problem is there to be solved, and what kind of creative solution can I come up with to solve it? And that's how businesses start. They don't start based on massive dreams and 1,000-page, product requirement documents. They start based on simple conversations. And I encourage, whether it's my daughter, who's decided to start a T-shirt company 2 weeks ago, and my wife is fully consumed with, and we're setting up a Shopify store, who saw a trend with her friends that they constantly want to buy new T-shirts. And we figured out a way to get the business off the ground, and she's designing things and doing a course at Ladies Learning Code this weekend to do design. And just that was all very simple in understanding that there was, an opportunity to sell T-shirts.
How old is she?
She's 12.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah, there you go.
Me too.
Her company named Urban Retro, by the way. You can follow her on Instagram. She's set up.
That's awesome.
But, that's what being an entrepreneur is about. It's having conversations with people and, trying to solve real problems. And, if you run into walls of people saying that there isn't something here, believe them in most cases. Not all cases, but in most cases. Because unless you have a lot of money or a lot of free time behind it, it's hard to get something off the ground unless there's a real idea there to be had.
Great. Questions? We'll go from there too.
Yeah, I want to direct this question to Bruce. So, can you talk about growing your business? You mentioned that when you started your business, right? You got 2 placements already before you quit your job. What about after that 2 placements? What sort of approach did you take to get new clients?
So because I came from technology, the client piece was relatively easy, and I guess when, we've grown pretty linearly, so it's not typical of a tech company, it's more of a services company, where to get new business, I guess, the first thing is, the reason why we're in business has never changed from day one to today. We're here to help the community grow, and we don't just say it, we live by that. And I think when it takes time to build a brand, we didn't spend thousands of dollars on marketing or anything. It was very much word of mouth and doing a good job. And that's really how we grew the client base, was doing a good job, having a very clear and consistent message around why we were in business and what our goal was. It's like when you're a tech company and all you talk about is features and functionality. Like Derek was saying, they don't talk about being brainwave technology. They talk about how they impact people. And I think, that's the best way to build a brand, and which ultimately leads to growing a business is just that, is figuring out why you're in business and the value you bring. So I don't know if that answers your question directly. The short answer around how we grew from a people standpoint and a revenue standpoint is as a it's a simple business, right? So
Yeah, I think that answers it.
Awesome. What's the next one? Iris.
I have a question for both of you, actually. So in the very early stage of the company, like how do you attract and hire the talents into your company to generate revenue, whether they're recruiters or technology specialists? Like how do you hire them into the company when the concept and the company branding is still relatively new to the market?
I think when you're hiring people, one is I found that you have to have the mindset that you're going to do a lot of the work yourself, right? And anything that needs done. It could be taking out the garbage, or it could be speaking to an investor. So the mindset is you have to be yourself, very willing to do what it takes. And I'd say that's one of the characteristics of a successful startup, that you know what it takes. You have to have the idea, and then you have to be really committed to do what you need to do. To attract people, quite often, there's two models. I often I make an analogy to a sports team. So when you're a startup, you're basically, it's like a family. You're bringing the people that want to work with you, or or your network, or who you can afford, right? There's a lot of constraints on it. Now, if you're, you can make that analogy. You're the local team in Brampton in terms of soccer, right? Now, if you then take that to a sports analogy, where you've got lots of money, you're picking different players at that time. So you have to understand that from a startup to a very successful company, when we have lots of money, I'll be, phoning my good friend here, Bruce, and saying, Bruce, I really need the best person in the world in machine learning. Go anywhere in the world and find that person. So, as you attract people, I think there's different techniques for where you are in your evolution. But very much at the beginning, you're very much relying on your network and your brand within events like this. So, word of mouth, and people can say, Interaction's a really cool company. You get free snacks at it, and you get yoga, and you get to drink after 5 o'clock, right? It's that word of mouth and creating an environment that people like. And I think you need a very strong brand that is aligned to what the person wants. So we're doing some really cool stuff that no one else is doing. We're doing deep machine learning on brainwaves, and that's cool. That's not making another pick up your Starbucks app, right? Which, there's hundreds. I believe in California is now signs saying no more food apps actually on restaurant stores, right? It's because everyone's doing food apps. So I think you have to do something that really inspires people. And we've had brain scientists. We had one intern that turned up from Germany saying, you're the best at what you want to do, and I'm working here and I'll do it for nothing. Right? Now, we would have done it if it was legal. We would have paid her nothing, but we do have protection here, so we did pay her money. But I think fundamentally you have to have something that really inspires people. If not, you're just going to get people looking for jobs. In a startup, the last thing you want is just people looking for jobs. You really need people that have got a big vision and want something to happen. So create a cool environment, have a cool idea, and treat people well.
I think another thing that I would add, and this has certainly been our approach, is higher based on the person, their resiliency, their drive, and their leadership capabilities, and provide them an environment where they can grow and be accountable and contribute. We've always, we've never, except for one exception, hired a recruiter. I never wanted anyone to come into our organization being jaded by working in the recruiting world. Although the one example, maybe Brandon Shimping. Do you know Brandon? He was at Randstad for years. Anyway, I think you mentioned you're at Randstad, right? Anyway, so one exception. But, we we didn't, you know, it's not like machine learning or AI or VR or data science where you need to come in with underlying knowledge. It's more about the person that you're hiring than anything, and you can train them. So I think it depends on your business, what skills you need versus what type of person you need, and you need to kind of find that balance. So certainly with, you know, we work with a ton of startups that are between 5 and 15 people, and I've seen, unfortunately, many startups fail because their leaders, they weren't transparent, they weren't humble, and they were really in it for the valuation as opposed to, you know, building something special. And that can ultimately be your detriment. So as a leader, you know, you've got to be able to relate to your people and contribute and help them grow. You know, otherwise it can be a short trip.
Yeah, and I'd add one thing, is when you're doing a startup, you've usually got a limited budget with a limited amount of heads. So you hire for not just a particular skill set, but people that know, that can actually do what you need done. So you wouldn't go and hire a salesperson, right? If with what you need done is penetration into retail, you would go and find someone with that particular skill set that can actually demonstrate that they can actually bring in, you know, and do what you need done, that they can actually go and get the relationships, they can actually build a channel, they can, you know, do the merchandising. So very much, you don't hire generalists in startup, you hire specific skills that are very much aligned to the business plan that you need to actually execute on.
A follow-up question for that is like, how do you find the balance between the human capital value enterprises? Like a lot of times, like for example, like great recruiters are very expensive. They can make like 100K or 200K already in another company. So if you want to hire like a new recruiter who can actually generate value to your company, like if you hire someone new, you probably have to take time and train them. Like you said, like a leader has to involve with them and interact with them on a daily basis. Like that will actually take away your time. So how do you find a balance of that?
And I would tell you that's the hardest thing that I have to balance, quite honestly. Listen, I still do searches. Like, I love recruiting. I do many of our executive searches. So it is a balance. Like, it's very much, you know, for us, it's also how we do the workplace design. So, you know, it's pretty straightforward, but we're very collaborative. There's a ton of whiteboards where we're sharing information, creating transparency, and allowing visibility. And, you know, we have stand-ups on a regular basis, which we steal from the agile world, where we're talking as a team. Anna runs weekly meetings with our recruiters where we're sharing information. So it's tough to balance in the fact that we hire people that don't necessarily come from recruiting, but you know, the bigger challenge for us isn't necessarily learning recruiting, it's learning technology. So we're an agency that really strives to be an extension of our clients. So the complexity is, how do you learn, you know, NIMI, 500 picks, Ecobee, Cisco Videoscape, Capital One, Scotia Digital Factory, and be able to present opportunities to clients. Like you really need to be able to go to a deeper level. So we, you know, my belief from the beginning has been, despite being a small business, you don't have to operate like one. Like the things I learned in a big company was, you know, how do you build automation around processes and leverage technology for knowledge sharing and for eliminating friction within process. And that's really what we strive to do. And, you know, if I look at our team, we've got a bunch of recruiters, and then we only have 2 people that aren't recruiters on the team. So lots of agencies are loaded with more administrative type people, and we don't really have any of that. Everyone's adding value. So I would encourage anyone that's starting a business to be careful where you spend the money, whether it's a startup or not, and ensure that they are contributing and adding value, either as a salesperson money-wise or as an engineer progressing the product or whatever it may be.
Great, I think there was a question back.
Oh yeah, thank you for sharing your insights first. And actually, my question is also for both gentlemen and very similar to the last one. My question is about not the people you are hired. It's your partners. But at the very first place, even before you start your business, how did you find your partners and the core team? Who are they? How do you find them? And as your business grows, your interests may start diverse. How did you maintain your relationship with them, and like personally and professionally? And is there any conflict between you and your partners, and how did you solve it? Thank you.
You want to go first?
I'll give it a simplified answer. My partner's my wife, so you know, and being a husband and wife is number one. I can assure you, beyond the business, that's the most important thing. So that's you know, that's interesting. Does anyone have a partner relationship such as that in there? Okay. All right. Listen, my wife's the reason why this whole thing got off the ground, so I give her 100% credit. She's the fire in our household that you know, encouraged me to do it, and ultimately made it happen. So, and sorry, what was the second part of your question?
It doesn't matter.
Because the cost for moving on is too high in that case.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll actually kind of combine both questions in the sense that when it comes to growing our company, I actually dedicate time every week just to meet new people. I don't have a job in mind, but I'll invest in time just to have a coffee with someone, because I want a big Rolodex in my head of people that I can add, you know, maybe out to a year or two, where I know that's the person I want to lead engineering. I can't afford them right now, but I know I can. And you know, when then I have that contact I can go back to and encourage them. And we recently attracted Tracy, who was responsible. Does everyone must know Rock Band and Guitar Hero and Dance Central? Well, she was the product manager that brought them all to the world. And you know, I recruited her a year and a half ago before I could even dream of affording her. And then we brought her in about 6 months ago. So I think you have to take a long-term view, and again, it's all about relationships. And that would go for people you're hiring or people you want to do business with, is invest the time to tell your story and listen to their story, even though you might not be right for each other at this particular time. Also,
How frequently were you quitting her?
I would see her maybe once every 4 months.
Okay,
Right.
for my own notes. Okay.
Right, so it's
Very
not,
good
it's
tip.
not,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like every week,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it would have to be convenient, right? The other one is, I learned a lot from BlackBerry. Right? BlackBerry was it was a huge company at one time, and there was a point where a third of Canadians used BlackBerries just as phones, and now it's like less than 0.25%. But one thing that BlackBerry did is they tried to do everything themselves, right? They tried to do manufacturing themselves, software themselves. They tried to own the whole ecosystem. And it seldom was true in BlackBerry, but it became actually quite a cumbersome tool. You can actually do things very quickly. And you know, it doesn't mean that it was wrong for BlackBerry. There was an amazing company and did a lot for Canada. But one of the things I personally took from that is I'm growing this business through partnerships. So I really don't want to do anything myself, apart from the core things that differentiate us. Like, we understand brain signals better than anyone. We understand how them to be an experience, turn them into a consumer experience or a medical experience. But we want partners, and we're already speaking to big companies. We've actually attracted big companies like Flextronics is one of the largest manufacturers. They make most of the Apple computers, for example. They make your Nike running shoes. A $30 billion company. We actually got them to invest in us, and it's still a very important partnership for us. Even though we're not at the volume right now, we would turn it over to them, but we've already started to work in that partnership in terms of how we can, you know, from our point of view, when I speak to investors, I can say how we can scale the company. Because when people look at your company, they look at, you know, do you have a problem you're solving? You know, can you scale it? Is it protected? And one of them, can you scale the company? So you have to take this, in your partnerships, you have to take this forward-looking view of really investing in partnerships early on, even though there isn't, don't be caught into, I'm only going to speak to you if you're used to me now. Right, I need you now, so be my friend. Actually say, I don't need you now, but I want to know you, because there could be some time in the future this is going to be beneficial for both of us. So I personally take a very long view to investing in partnerships and getting to know people and building that trust. And once you've got that trust, the conversations become very authentic and very, very real. So a long-term view is what I would put to it. If you go to people in our team, there's a lot of people in my team I've brought in because I've known them in the past as well, so I know that they're a true and tried entity and I can trust on them. That's a quick solution. It might be a bit unfair because there's probably people that could be better, but I know they can do the job, so to bring them in and just let them to do that is very beneficial to the company. And one thing we do is a senior leadership team. There's about 6 or 7 of us, which is a blend of the founders and people we've brought in with experience, is we make a point of socialising with each other where we don't worry about work. We just went over to, it was our EVP of marketing and sales. She just hosted everyone over at her house. We brought in an outside caterer and we went down to the basement and played, games at the end of the night. But we invest in each other as well in terms of socially and helping each other. And I think that's important. One thing I try to encourage in the team is don't just do what's important to you, but really do what's important to your colleagues as well. So, there's many, many ways you can invest in relationships. And really just, the first thing is to really internalize the power and importance of relationships in business. If you don't get that, you probably won't be successful in business.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, Derek. So I got a question for you. So imagine you were at the very early stage of a startup, like technical startup company, and you're building something that you think requires excellent skill to do it. So do you think where you put the company actually matters? Say you start a company in Toronto versus you start a company in Silicon Valley. So say when you put your company at Silicon Valley, will you consider that to be a value because you can hire more talented people? I'm not saying that we're having fewer, but it's just the odds are probably better.
Yeah, I think where you put the company is it's critical and key,
Yeah.
right? The reasons that we want an American presence is it's hard work there's a lot of influencers in places like LA and San Francisco, and for us to fly down to be half part of that community is really not effective. You really have to have people there that can really become part, do networking like this down in, and become part, really understand how that community can bring value to your company and how you can bring value to that community.
Okay.
There is definitely, if you look at things like, we were lucky that in brain science we actually have a lot of really cool brain scientists coming out of universities within Toronto. A lot of them end up, abroad or down in the US. But if you really want things like really senior engineering talent and development talent, people that have done it before, the reality is most of the startups have come out of the valley, right? Toronto's getting really cool at it. Waterloo and Toronto are really, I think, really beginning to build some momentum. But if you really want to go and hire people that have really walked the path before, the prospect of attracting, one, you have to attract them to Canada, right? You have to attract them to Canada where it's like snowing and cold for 6 months of the year, right? And then you have to explain to them about taxes in Canada aren't 20%, right? You have to hand half your money over to the government, right? So there's a lot of cultural things where sometimes it's easier to get that pool of talent, I think, just to move to places like California. Now I hope that changes, and I'm committed to doing my part to make that change over the next 10 years, but the reality is California has a lot of senior talent that have done things, time and time again.
If I could just add to that, so the one cautionary note though is, if you plan on going to California or Seattle or New York, be prepared to play with sharks, because while in Toronto it may appear like a competitive environment,
Yeah.
the environment to recruit in those locations is beyond intense. And it's a very transient environment as well. So money and options drive people from moving company to company. And it is very difficult to compete with the likes of those like Snapchat and places like that that gobble up great engineers based on $1 million, $2 million, $3 million RSU packages. So my advice would be that we're in a community where Waterloo, U of T, Ryerson, OCAD, a number of educational places provide a tremendous foundation of talent. And once you get to a point where you need to bring in people that have exposure scaling, certainly there's lots of Canadians in the Valley, admittedly tough to get them to come back, but by the time you get there, I'm sure that Canada will continue to have grown leaders that can do this. Like, I've completed exec searches recently for a number of companies that I would consider significant, with engineering organizations of 400 to 700 people, and the talent is here. It is hard to find. Like, scaling is a big challenge. Like, there's few companies that provide that exposure, but the base level talent is certainly here, in my opinion, to get from at least kind of 0 to 50 people. Beyond that, it depends on your needs, but it's here.
Thanks.
On the back.
I have two questions. One question is for Bruce. So, would you recommend young people to start business with their husband or wife? Does it create any tension between that? And how did you deal with the tension when you have a disagreement? Who did you listen to?
Sure. Listen,
One question.
there's only one answer for me, and the answer is yes. And that's because, again, I give my wife credit for this business. So I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her, for sure. It's you've got to understand what each other's roles are, because it does become complicated, right? So, I think we both enjoy our relationship much more not being at work together all the time. My kids are young, so she's consumed a lot with that and is more involved in the business development side of things versus the day-to-day workings of the organization. So you've kind of got to find that line, though. And I think the most important thing is, when you go home, you can't talk about work.
Mm-hmm.
No, but that's honestly, that's
very
what, you've got to keep that separation. Even today, my wife and I don't talk that much about work.
So you only talk when you in the office. I have another question for both of you. It's about failure. So what was your most recent failure, and why did you fail, and how did you cope with it?
It's an interview question.
Very introspective. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I fail every day at things. I'm not afraid of failing, and I mess up many things all the time. I'm okay with it, right? I guess I get used to it after a while. But, I have a lot of successes as well, and I tend to, I do reflect a lot on why things don't work and figure out how to do it better next time. The one that I do reflect on a lot, a big, when I was at BlackBerry, I was within the top 20 people at BlackBerry, and it was an amazing company, and it, employed 20,000 people, and as I said, a third of the people in Canada and the US were using BlackBerries, and yet now it's not. It's a company of probably, I'm not sure the size, 3-4 million people, and the department I ran was bigger in revenue than the whole of BlackBerry is now. And I reflect, I can't walk away not taking some blame. The stuff that I did during my reign